Thank
And
you.
so, yes, Kristen, thank you so much for being here with us and for lending your voice and perspective. And so, everyone, typically before we have the community conversations, I make sure that I at least talk to panelists for a few minutes just to get their perspectives and their unique backgrounds. And one thing that really stuck with me that I love you to speak to, Kristen, is just that you share that you really sit in two worlds. Will you speak to that a little bit more in regards to you being a parent and just your general perspective?
Sure. So I said I sit in two worlds because I live here in Richmond, but I also work out of DC. And so, I'm thinking about, race and racism and being a good part of the community as a parent. But then in my professional life, I lead communications and advocacy for a healthcare nonprofit that's looking at systemic racism and the ways that affects public health and individual health. And so my whole sort of career journey, a lot of what has helped make me more comfortable talking about race openly has been from my professional career, and it really influenced how I parent. And so, I work with these amazing researchers and scientists who are looking at how we make people healthier, and part of that is equity and social justice. And I've learned a lot by just shutting up and listening, which is something that they've sort of raised for us before, because I think often those of us, white people tend to take too much air out of the space of the conversation. And so, early on in my career, I had a great mentor, a Black woman, hand me Cornell West's Race Matters book and be like, you need to go read this. I was raised in Atlanta. I'm from Tennessee. Like, it was an important book. And it was really a transformational experience for me. It changed the way I see the world in a very positive way. And, because I was a journalism major, because I communicate for a living, that's how I've gone about learning. I read, I do social media. I read Ta-Nehisi Coates. I just read White Fragility. I'm trying to read How to Be an Anti-Racist. But it's funny, after I talked to you this morning, Adrian, I was on Twitter and somebody posted a cartoon that said, reading a book about racism doesn't make you an anti-racist.
Mm.
And they used the analogy of like reading a book about mountain climbing doesn't make you a mountain climber. And so I thought that was such an important perspective.
Yeah.
And I think I'm still trying to learn and trying to teach my kids that you have to deal with these issues, not just by talking, but by doing. And the
Yeah.
doing is what's talking is scary, doing is scarier.
Yeah.
And so, just trying to walk the walk.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
do the
I
work.
so appreciate you sharing that about because what I've noticed even in the last and I'll do it at the end of the hour. I'll give it away. We're going to send all of these resources about what to read, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. What do you do with the reading and the knowledge? So I'm curious from your perspective, the reading that you've done, the work that you do professionally, how has that been applicable for you as a parent with your son? So how have you applied some of this knowledge and these kind of transformational kind of learnings that you've had?
Well, I mean, so much of it is the what I think one of the things that strikes out is sort of the little things that you teach your kids intentionally or unintentionally. And you know there's there's this great book about, like, what do you do when your kid points to someone and calls out their difference, right? And with our kids, we always try to say, yeah, that person's different, isn't it cool how God made them, right? Like,
Mm.
to try and name difference as a positive thing and not imply that one way is the best way. But you know, my boys are now 10 and 12. They're starting to get to the age where, bullying is a much bigger deal. We talk about race and racism and their role in having a voice, and we try to talk to them about putting themselves in somebody else's shoes. And even at this very young age, and in what we think is a pretty diverse neighborhood for the West End, and our kids have experienced racism. They've seen it. My youngest son had a friend who, was told, in no uncertain terms, like, you need to go home. Like, and that was appalling to me. And it's so real and so tangible. And my son and I had to talk about the fact that like he has a role. Like as a young man who is white, he has privilege and power and he has to use it. And we said, like, how do you think your friend felt? What could you have done? You know, you were the younger, smaller boy in this situation. Where do you go for help?
Yes.
Because doing the right thing can be scary,
Yes.
and it has risks. But he has a position he can use, and you have to give him those words. You know, I even started with like, man, that's not cool, right? Like, you just have to give them the words to use,
Yes.
so they're there and they're easy to find. And you
Yes.
know, we're not perfect. My kids aren't at all perfect,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they're not always going to do the right thing. But you just keep trying to drill it in. Like,
Yes, indeed.
it's the little things you do that matter. It's asking
Yes.
the friend to sit with you. It's, you know,
Yeah. Standing up and standing in. I think I think the work, when I think of some of my allies and how they've come into understanding what white privilege is, you realize that your voice does matter, right? It's
yeah,
not just for the Black person, or the person of color to handle. And so I appreciate hearing you say that you talk to them even at that age about you have a voice and you have a position. And of course, you model it, but even kind of challenging him in that moment, if that happens again, what would you do? So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And so it kind of leads me to, because I know you also stated you believe you're an ally, right? And you are an ally, although you say you're working on things. And I said, we're all working on things.
yeah.
All of us are. But if you can kind of talk to us about, um, because being an ally can be represented in so many different ways. Tell us about that, and which you also described as helping your community to like unlearn racism. What does that look like for you in your home and even in your work?
Yeah. So I mean, there are a couple of ways that we're working on this, and y- unlearning racism, is really hard work, right? And we were all of us on the call were sort of raised into this environment, and we're taught in many ways the same things. And part of doing that, part of it's doing the work. Part of it is listening and reading and changing the words I use and the media I consume. Um, Part of it is, frankly, putting my privilege and my money where my mouth is.
Mm.
I try to contribute to causes that are led by Black people and people of color, so that they have the support, and I try to stand behind, um, instead of in the way. Um, and at work, one of the things that we're doing, I have a much bigger platform. I'm involved in an initiative to uplift scholars who are from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. I have an opportunity to invite speakers to meetings, and those are really powerful opportunities. But I struggle with those things that feel like low touch, right? So when we talked today, I said, I aspire to be a better ally. And I think there are allies, who march and are present. And, I so respect those people that are on the front lines of allyship and on advocacy. I wish I were more courageous sometimes to do those things too. So
Mm.
we're trying to teach our kids the right thing to do. We're trying to center Black voices in their lives. Um, and, we're just constantly working to do a better job. Um, just be better humans.
Yeah.
Just try to
Yep.
be better humans.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for your efforts. I'm kind of getting into my mommy mode, my parent mode too, but you try, and you hope that you're doing the best thing. But something you talked about was just the little things, and it really does come down to the little things. Working here with the school system, I often think about you have the school day, but then what happens outside of school really affects what happens in school. And so being someone that views parents as first teachers, essentially, it really does. It takes both of us, all of us working together to pour into our young people. So I thank you for being here on the panel. I could go on and on, but I know you'll be here with us if we have any other questions for you. But thank you so much for your voice and for being here. We're going to go next to our next is actually a duo panelist, Cynthia and Andre. I see you all on the screen. How are you all doing?
We are well.
Awesome. Awesome. Good to see you all. Thank you all for making time. I understand the busy lives that you all lead as parents of five amazing young
Yes.
people, right? Ranging from 15 to 4, one son
Yes.
and 4 daughters. I love it. Love it. Love it.
Yes.
And so, Cynthia, I talked to you earlier. Andre, good to see you. Thank you for
Hey.
making time. But I know Cynthia is a social justice and equity advocate, and then you also have you all both have a daycare here in Eastern Henrico, correct? Heaven sent childcare. Okay.
Yes. Haven't sent child care. That's
Okay.
correct.
So I want to just jump right in because one thing that stood out to me is that your son attended Freeman during the Confederate flag incident. And
Yes.
so I'm curious to hear from Cynthia and even you, Andre, as a dad, how did you all talk to your son and your other children for that matter about the incident?
Yeah. So, during the time when the incident happened, the kids, at that time, they were actually not in school. They were not in school, but, it was really upsetting because we got notice via the media. And then the communication came from the school after it released from the media.
Okay.
But it was very concerning,
Yes.
just worried about the safety and how something like that can happen on school grounds,
Yeah.
and not understanding why things weren't already in place to prevent things like that, especially with the climate that we're in right now.
Okay.
So what's your feedback?
I think just when I originally saw it, for me, I try to see what the child's thoughts are. So I try not to impose my thoughts on it.
Mm.
So I mainly just showed Joshua and to see what his reaction was. And I could see that he was really disappointed
Mm.
because, these are his classmates and his friends that are possibly in cahoots with whoever did this or possibly all the ones that did it.
Right.
So I could see that his disappointment was the biggest thing. I didn't want to make it a situation where we're angry about this, we're angry about this. I just wanted to see how he felt about it and put that to the forefront.
Yeah.
Awesome. So really centering his view and his perspective and just growing from there and
Correct.
teaching
Yes.
them. Yeah, which I think has really been a theme when it comes to these difficult conversations with young people. The incident happens, it's talking to them, but really is listening to them first to see what their perspective and view is. And then you're faced with ensuring they're confident to go into the next school year, and to be
Yes.
comfortable there and there and in their skin. Um, I'm curious, were there any particular actions that took place amongst parents to support young people during that time? I guess even outside of the school, but was there any kind of parent advocacy that you all were in? Okay, okay. So you kind
No,
of focus
no.
in at home. Yep, that's
Yeah, it was more at home. The conversations that you guys are bringing are refreshing,
hmm,
because that lets us know that there are individuals, in the community that understand that these conversations are needed.
yes,
I was a little disappointed in the school itself in regards to the response that we got. I still feel that there was nothing directly to African American families to say, we take accountability, we sorry, or anything just to make us feel at ease.
okay,
Um, it was very broad. It was
okay,
very broad.
okay. I think that's fair. As difficult of a time as it seems, I just keep reminding myself that it seems to be so much opportunity to have those kind of
Yes.
real conversations. I have intentionally set myself to be open to that type of feedback, to
Yeah.
see what are the learning lessons for us as a school system,
Yeah.
as we make sure that we're supporting all of our young people. So I definitely hear you when you're talking about just specific reach out because we talk about safety and we want our young people to feel safe. So thank you for that. It makes me think about our conversation earlier, and I don't know if I told you this was going to be a question or not, but I'm thinking about our conversation. So you talked about, we were talking about COVID and kind of going back into school, and you were sharing from your perspective as you've been in contact with a few other, in this instance, you were talking about other Black parents and just really what safety means, you know, and how I think race came up around that in school climate.
Yeah.
Will you share your perspectives and just what you've been hearing around that too? Because of course the large conversation around school reopening is coming up as well. So I'm interested for you to share a little bit more about the connection between the two from your perspective.
Yeah, so like right now, I feel that the conversation is just solely surrounding COVID. But as an African American family with African American children, our conversations and our decisions are not just based on COVID. It's COVID and the pandemic of racism. Us having the concern that, like, right now, even in broad daylight, you have lynchings happening. I feel like we're back with Martin Luther King. So it's like, if I send my children to school, am I going to have to worry about my child being that next child that turns up in the gym, rolled up in the carpet, and no one could give answers? Am I going to have to worry about some maniac, that's a racist, going into the school grounds and just shooting up the place? Or, that's what I'm worried about. Am I going to have to worry about another bombing or something like that? I mean, it's just, and it's not even just with school, it's just even thinking about even church, because right now, the climate, it's like we're on the brink of a civil war. And I mean, from the adults, coming out of the woodworks, adults that we've known, adults that we work with, adults that we did outreach with, just to be able to see their true hearts come out as racist. And then even seeing, as my husband said, some of the kids that are the same age as my son that go to his school, posting videos online that are very racist. So it's just like, that's our concern. And the president hasn't addressed that. The school district hasn't addressed that. Like, how are we going to ensure our children are safe past the pandemic of COVID? Like, how are we going to make sure they're not going to be harmed? Like that's what we're thinking about as African American parents. It's not just about COVID, and everyone is kind of skating over that conversation. But it's needed, it's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I meant loaded, but you're right there, and I appreciated you sharing that to again center all of what's going on. I think everything feels so. It's such a magnitude of everything that's happening, but making sure that we include that when we're talking about safety and comfort,
Yeah.
and including that in our check-ins with our young people, but also our parents when we're talking about what school looks like in the fall and just how we operate. Um,
Yes.
I can't say thank you enough for your voice, and I'm hopeful that this will be just a small addition to us getting to solutions.
Yeah.
My last question, because again, I could talk to each of you all for much longer than we have, but what advice would you give to other guardians and parents that may see themselves in you? How would you suggest that they get started just with doing the work?
Yes. Well, I'll start and I'll let Andre, or did you want to start with that?
Good.
Okay. Um,
Love it.
for me, I would just, tell any parent, like, when I just look at myself and just think about some of the things I did, I would say to try to create change yourself, to be the change that you would require or want to see in the world. That's just one thing about me. As a business owner, as a mom, as a wife, I'm just all about creating a solution. So if I don't see it being done, instead of me trying to go around and try to figure it out and see who the person is to talk to, I just bring the solution. So I just want parents to understand, like, sometimes you are the solution. You might not necessarily have the resources, but you know, if God has given you that vision, to go ahead and provide that because someone needs it. So continue to advocate for your children. Don't allow anyone to label your children. You know, don't accept the first diagnosis, even when it comes to them, you know, giving your children IEPs. You know, make sure that you're really advocating, getting second opinions. Like, do not let up. Don't let anyone just put your child aside or label your child. Just, you know, continue to fight for your child. Don't give up. I know at times I've witnessed parents where it's taking years for them to get results, but they did not give up. So if you don't fight for your child, no one else is really going to do that. So you need to be that first advocate, even if your efforts is finding someone, you know, that's going to help you fight. You know, you're still doing what you have to do as a parent.
Awesome.
To piggyback off of that, I would say something I teach my children all the time, and I would teach to anybody, parent, young, old, just be aware. You have to be aware of what's going on. A lot of times you're fighting a battle, but that's not really even the fight you need to be fighting. There's something going on in the background that's covert that you probably don't even have any knowledge of. Give you an example. You may want to look into redistricting, things of that nature. That may be a fight you want to take on as opposed to going after a school district leader or whatever the case may be. Redistricting is a real big issue that I really pay attention to because you never know why that's happening, when it's happening, and it affects your child and affects yourself as a parent as well. So just being aware of those situations really gets you ahead of the game and gets you a game plan to figure out what you need to do, what battles worth fighting and what battles not worth fighting.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you all for all of those nuggets. I know you all are going to stay on with us as well. We're going to go over to our next panelist, but thank you all for your perspective. Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. So next we have Nusha Dow. Nusha, are you here on the call? Yep. There you are. How are you? Good to see you.
Fine. How are you?
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. So you all, Nusha is a proud Iranian American that's really sought to instill confidence and respect for other cultures and perspectives in her daughter, Ozzy. I love her. I love that name. So I'd just love to jump right into your school experiences, Nusha, and letting you just share a few areas regarding inclusion that made a difference for you. I was really impressed by just in you how you shared some of the changes that happened in your school. So if you could even start there without me telling the story, you could share a bit of that.
Sure. Just a few years ago at Short Pump Elementary, we got an amazing new principal who's African American, Dr. Sarah Slaughter, who was incredible and really worked hard to try to show off and help us celebrate the diversity that exists at Short Pump, which we're really happy about. There is a lot of diversity. It's not the diversity you usually hear about. I don't know about the socioeconomic diversity. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of African Americans or Hispanics, but we do have a lot of South Asians and other international communities. Mm-hmm. Like my daughter's classes have always been only about half white and half international. So Dr. Slaughter really did a great job of highlighting a different country every month that helped us be more proud and share different tidbits about our country. And she made sure that we did International Night, which was a really big deal for my daughter, who really proudly walked around school wearing her, outfit, an Iranian outfit. And even like I surprisingly had one of her friends who is white say, be really sad that she didn't have a costume to wear that night, which I feel bad about. I would have loved to give her something if I'd known, but she and the school did a really great job of helping us feel proud of who we are at the school.
Awesome. And what I appreciate the story, but I felt as though you also shared it wasn't always like that. Like there was a shift and you felt that shift there. And, I know you gave a lot of credit to, and I know she's leaving. She's not going to be at Shore Pump anymore. But to the, who was Miss Slaughter, who was over there. And so one topic that's come up is, the importance of having diverse perspectives, even on staff, and how you can see that show up. I know you mentioned that there's been like an international night, and just again, the highlighting of cultures that help for you to feel a little bit more of that inclusivity for sure. What has it been like the last month? As you know, the nation has held protests and uprisings regarding George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. What has it been like for you as a parent, and just supporting Ozzy and how she comes to understand all that's happening?
Well, she heard about it as it was happening from different members of our family who were joining the protests, like in Maryland and DC. And we sat her down and explained the source of the protests from both sides, and the fear that we think is the basis of a lot of police behavior and power, which is another part of source of the anger that the police have often, and the different reasons for why people are protesting and why they're angry against the police, which we sort of have taught this. These are our resources in our community, these are people that we go to for help and whatnot. So we also shared with her our trip to the Lee Monument and some of the graffiti, explaining some of the graffiti that's on the monument and why people are angry and why it's such angry graffiti and why it's important to remove these monuments. So it's been a great opportunity to have really important discussions about discrimination and racism.
Yes. You also mentioned that that your daughter Ozzy, and Ozzy is 10. 10.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that she gets kind of emotional about these topics regarding race. What types of, just additional conversations or supports have you provided so that she's comfortable and feels heard during this time?
Well, I think a couple things that I try to do are to respect her space a little bit. She doesn't want to talk about it all the time, so I'm very careful about when I bring it up. And, I remember there have been times when she was younger where she would get really upset about the homeless people or people begging for money on the street that we don't give money to. And that didn't make sense to her, but we had to explain that we believe in promoting self-sufficiency in other ways by supporting organizations like Caritas, volunteering at Caritas, and why that is more supportive of people rather than just giving money on the side of the road.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to respect where she's coming from and also be very careful and loving when I do explain things to her, because she is very sensitive and she prefers to avoid a lot of these conversations. But sometimes she surprises me. We went to the beach 2 weekends ago and she was playing with 2 white girls, and a group of African-American girls came over and showed her some minnows that they had picked up. And my daughter, and once they left, the 2 white girls said to my daughter, "Our grandfather says that we don't like Black people." And my daughter was really taken aback, and they asked her, "Well, do you care about Black people?" And she said, "Yes, of course I do." And then when I saw her a little bit later, her face was all mad, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "Racial injustice." And I'm like, "What happened?" And she explained it to me, and I was like, "Good job. You explained your point of view, and I think that you made a really good point, and I'm proud of you."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell Ozzy I said thank you too, right? Because it's in those moments, again, something that she's seeing, being comfortable enough to use her voice when it mattered. And hopefully what she said may have stuck with her other new friends that she met, on the beach, just to affect that change. So thank you. Thank you so much. I know you're going to stay on. The time always goes by so quickly. But, next up, you all, I just wanted to share, we did have another panelist that was going to be with us on Tuesday, but when we moved to Thursday, he couldn't be here, but he did send in a short statement. At the same time of me addressing his statement, I do want to address some of the questions. So one question, or I guess comment came in was, why did we start with the white panelists the first two sessions? And so again, I don't know if we can ever get it completely right. I definitely hear you. I will say that Mr. Dew's statement, he was going to be just a black male voice on the panel. Since he was going to be first, I'm just going to read it now. But I definitely hear you when it comes to that. It's really no set rhyme or reason as far as how we choose. But I hear you, whoever, sent in the comment. And so anyway, he just shared a little bit about his perspective. And I just want to read a small snippet. It's a whole page, but read a small snippet of what he shared. And so this question that we wanted him to, respond to was just, what types of conversations and experiences have you been holding at home in order to support your child's understanding of race and equity? And he says, I'm a father of 3 boys, a mentor to college students, and nonprofit owner in healthcare. I share with my circle of influence my experiences in order to have them ask questions, create dialogue, and share in their stories. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area and lived in a primarily African American centered community where all of our needs and wants were met in that community. The community leaders, priests, doctors, lawyers, grocery stores, and laborers were Black, and so were the criminals. In that community, race and equity were not an issue because we were all the same in general. Most people worked hard to provide for their families and faced the same obstacles. In high school, I transitioned into a predominantly all-boys white school, Gonzaga, because the school that was offered in my areas were challenged. I was an outsider until the freshman class had to pull. I was an outsider until the freshman class had to pull together, and our shared experience brought us together. Although I didn't have a bad experience when I was a minority, I decided to attend an HBCU in New Orleans because the community of people I knew was important to further my development. The choices I made dictate the person I have become, no matter the experiences, along with my own biases and prejudices. I tell my boys the same thing. Their choices and experiences will define them. And if you don't expand what you know or who you know, your experiences and options in life will limit or propel you into your future. Racism in America can move to a more positive direction, and we are on the front lines to making it happen, one conversation at a time. And so while we're remiss that Mr. Doe could not be with us here tonight, I'm grateful for him sharing his insight. He also was involved in a parent kind of diversity group at Godwin, in which the principal and parents got together and put together a panel there. And so just wanted to share that bit. I'm going to go and try to look and see if any particular questions came in. Thank you again to all of our panelists who were here. And let's see what we have. And hopefully you enjoy the perspectives too. The real hope is that we are motivated to change and motivated to do something, in our unique communities. I often talk about what's your sphere of influence and how do you change and challenge that. And so I know some people are doing things in their schools, some people are doing things in their homes, in their neighborhoods. And so hopefully we're all being just encouraged to do so. One question came up. How can we change our curriculum in all subjects to make it more inclusive? And so I share that, to say we try to gear the questions towards the panelists who are there, but I do think parents and guardians are able to get involved. I know over the last month, I've seen several emails to come in, and some of the consistent feedback comes up around curriculum. You notice even the students, that was a concern for them too. And so I think what's important to do is to voice your concerns, send the email, make the phone call, do the reach out. I think the work ahead of us is going to take more. It's going to take more voices and more perspectives to come to the table. And so for whoever sent that comment, thank you. I would say start with your principal, reach out to your school board, reach out to your school leaders as well, because it's a topic right now. And we want to make sure that we're being inclusive when we're looking at what that curriculum looks like. Let's see, what else do we have? This is a PTA question. It's about, and I'll just share it. To increase equity, could we have all PTA funds raised by all HCPS schools go into a shared fund to be distributed on a per pupil basis? I mean, I love community economics. I do. Now, I know that there are a few kinks in between, how PTAs use their funds and things of the sort. But, I would say the sky is the limit when we're talking about supporting our families. One thing in particular, even, as we look at COVID, we were able to work very closely with the Henrico Education Foundation. This was right before school ended, that Friday. We didn't know what would come up, but we knew that families and students would need to be supported. We were able to create a fund and raise several dollars that have been going towards food supports. It's going to go towards supply supports as well when we're looking at going back to school. And so I say whatever the thought is, I think it starts with talking about it, as the person who brought the comment up. So thank you for thinking about that. Surprisingly, we don't have a lot of other questions. I'm looking to see, but there are no new questions. I can't really see a lot of faces, but I'm hopeful that you all got something that was insightful for you, just even hearing from some of our parents. I think what I'll go to now is just, and we can go to the next slide, just a few tips, and then also we'll share out just a few resources that may be helpful as well. So starting early, sometimes you think that your child has to be a certain age to begin the conversation, but you can start, I think they say, as young as 1 and 2, the way that young people are seeing themselves and forming themselves, acknowledging differences, which I think is something that we've heard from several of our panelists as well. Differences are unique. Differences are positive. And so how do we acknowledge that to, again, continue confidence in our young people? Being a role model, talking about bigotry and talking very directly about it, encouraging empathy and exposing our children to diversity. From personal experience, I attempt to do that often with my daughter through books and through experiences. We're often going to festivals to learn about other cultures, just so she can have as much of an immersion experience as possible. And just not to tolerate just hatred of any kind, being open and making sure that we have a positive stance when it comes to talking against things that aren't kind words or even actions. All right. And then just a general resources. We shared this last time, but we're sharing it again. And first, what we have there is connecting with your school. Leadership is leadership. District leaders are district leaders. But where you see a lot of synergy happening is really in our school communities. I've been very impressed, even since we've been doing the series, hearing about the various schools that are looking to stand up conversations to the very unique needs happening there. You see community groups who are doing a very similar thing. My hope is that we all come into collaboration around that. And so while this is meant to inspire, connect with your school, reach out to your principals, your counselors, your social workers to see what's happening and if it's something that you can get involved in. You also have a few other links there, our EDO department, VCIC, which is really taking a lead around the state around having these conversations. And then, of course, the general website for our PTA. Again, tons of resources, and we can send this out if it's helpful. But we're just sharing here just some of the places and some of the links that are available online for parent resources. There have been several things that have happened. If you're anything like me, I'm kind of saving them and going to them as I have the time and energy to digest it all. but there are tons of resources online when it comes to parent resources and books as well. We have some books for younger people, and I think I mentioned earlier, I really lean in here as a parent because we're often reading and using that time to have a diverse selection of books. And so you have some for our younger children, and then there also are some books that are chapter books for some of our older children as well. And so here you have a list of several of them, some that I know our young people have read in school. The Hate U Give is a very popular one. But, you know, even considering a book club at home with your family and talking through some of those things through just through reading and immersion. All right, so we already had a crowd that was pretty, I think, pretty on par when it came to feeling comfortable talking to your child about race and equity. But we are going to close out with you all doing the poll again. Staff, if you have, and if you can drop the link in the comments. And I would just love to see how people respond. So we will give that a minute to let them come in as well. Okay. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Very comfortable, somewhat comfortable. It says uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Typo. But very comfortable and then somewhat comfortable for the most part. Well, I'm glad to hear it. You know what I say, if I could give one challenge, I would say take something either that you've learned tonight or something that's already been on you and share it with someone else. You know, talk to your friends, talk to your colleagues, find those spaces of comfort, so to speak, to just share and challenge each other a bit more. I believe that's truly where the change happens, and through conversations like this. I just want to give a big thank you to our panelists who took the time to be here this Thursday evening, to our attendees who showed up after a rather last-minute postponement. Thank you all for understanding, and thank you all for sticking with us through these sessions. We have 2 more to go. The next one is going to focus on schools, and I will share many of the questions that have come in naturally have been about schools, and so we're going to ask that you join us back. I should have the date in front of me. July 20th is the next date. So that will be a focus on schools. And following that, we'll have the focus on community. When we're looking at those family-school partnerships, it's focused on family, students, communities, and schools. So we're really trying to touch all of those. Again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you back in 2 weeks.